The sun burned low on the Kansas horizon, smearing blood-orange streaks across the dust-thickened sky. A hot wind rattled through brittle mesquite branches, dragging a low whine over the prairie. Sam Callahan shifted in his saddle, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his sweat-stained hat. His mare, Rose, stomped at flies but obeyed his silence. He'd ridden out for salt and tobacco 2 days prior. Now, all he wanted was to get home before the storm built up behind him. The land stretched bare as bone. No towns for 40 miles. No company but the crows circling overhead and the whisper of wind across cracked earth. Sam preferred it that way. Solitude didn't talk back. Solitude didn't lie or beg or die screaming. He guided Rose down a ravine where the cottonwoods were just barely clinging to green. As he reached the bottom, he saw something move. Not fast. Not threatening. Just a slow, clawing gesture in the dust near the base of a dry wash. He pulled the reins and squinted. At first, he thought it was a coyote. Then, a child. Then he saw her hands, scraped raw, digging at the earth like it had swallowed something she needed to breathe. A girl. No, a young woman. Maybe 19, 20 at most. Barefoot, dress hanging in tatters off her too thin frame. Her hair was the color of sand and wild as prairie grass, falling over her face in greasy tangles. She didn't look up. Didn't seem to care someone was watching her. Sam didn't speak right away. He just watched. Her fingers curled around a brittle root, pulling it loose like it was gold. She wiped it on her skirt, lifted it to her mouth, and bit down. He cleared his throat, quiet but firm. She flinched, eyes flashing up like a deer ready to bolt. Dirt caked her face, but her eyes were sharp, alive, even in that hollowed-out shell. "You'll get sick from that," he said. She didn't answer. Just stared. Root still in hand. He slid from the saddle slow, making sure she saw his movements. No sudden gestures. No reaching for his holster, though his fingers twitched. He pulled a strip of jerky from his saddlebag and tossed it to the dirt near her. She didn't move. The wind kicked dust across it, but she didn't blink. Didn't speak. Her whole body screamed, "Don't trust. Don't dare." Sam stepped back, gave her space. "Ain't gonna drag you nowhere," he said. "Don't want nothin'. Just figured you could use food that ain't got worms in it." Still nothing. He mounted up again. Spurred Rose slowly past her, watching from the corner of his eye. She never reached for the jerky. Just kept digging. That night, as thunder rolled over the plains like distant cannon fire, Sam stared at his ceiling in the dark. He thought of her hands, the way they shook but never stopped. He told himself not to be a fool. He'd seen it before, pitiful types used as bait. Beggars who led you into a trap. You try to help, and next thing, your boots are gone, and your blood's cooling in the dirt. But she didn't look like bait. She looked like someone who hadn't been touched by kindness in years. He rose before dawn, mind made up before his boots hit the floor. Saddle, rifle, water. He rode back toward the ravine. She wasn't there. He searched the ridge, scanning between dying brush and broken rocks. A scorpion skittered underfoot. Nothing else stirred. Then he saw it, a fold in the earth near an outcrop, where wind had carved a pocket into the hillside. He dismounted and approached on foot. There she was, curled in on herself like a rabbit in a snare. One arm thrown over her head, the other clutched to her chest. Lips cracked. Skin blistered. Dust had gathered in the folds of her dress, turning her into part of the land. She wasn't moving. Sam crouched beside her, leaned in. Her breath was shallow but there. He hesitated only a second before sliding his arms beneath her shoulders. She didn't weigh more than a sack of feed. No protest, no flutter of waking fear. Just dead weight and silence. He got her onto Rose's back and held her steady with one arm, guiding the horse with the other. The wind was starting to bite now, chill behind the heat. The sky turned iron gray above them. Rain coming. Maybe worse. By the time they reached his ranch, the first drops had started falling. Slow and fat, tapping against the roof of his cabin like cautious knocks. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, carried her to the cot in the corner. It hadn't been used in over a year. Not since one of the cattle hands passed through sick and never made it past winter. He boiled water, cleaned her hands, found a dry blanket. She didn't stir. He left food nearby, more jerky, bread, even a few dried apples. He didn't say anything. Didn't touch her more than necessary. That night, he sat by the fire, staring at her shape beneath the blanket. The flames painted her face in orange and shadow. She looked young, but not innocent. Like someone who'd known fire and survived, but carried the smoke in her lungs. He thought of Anna then, his wife, how her breath had hitched in the birthing bed. How her hand slipped from his just before dawn. He remembered the sound of the wind that morning. How it sounded like someone wailing through a keyhole. When he finally slept, it was sitting up, rifle across his lap. The next morning, he found her sitting up, back against the wall. She was holding a piece of bread like it might vanish if she blinked. Still wary. Still silent. Their eyes met. She didn't speak. Neither did he. He nodded once. She didn't nod back. But she took another bite. Outside, the storm was gone. But the wind still carried grit and questions. He didn't ask where she came from. Didn't need to. Some stories were written in silence. And in that cabin, among the scars and the ghosts, two broken people shared their first one. And it wasn't a word. It was a meal. Morning seeped into the cabin through the gaps in the wood like liquid gold, but the warmth didn't touch either of them. Sam poured coffee into 2 tin cups, placing one near the girl where she sat cross-legged on the floor. She didn't reach for it. Just watched him from beneath a veil of tangled hair. Her eyes were calmer now, but still skittish, like a colt that had been roped one too many times. He didn't ask her name. She hadn't offered it, and he wasn't one to force words from someone who didn't have any left to spare. He worked outside most of the day, patching a broken fence and hauling feed. She didn't follow, didn't help. But he noticed the blanket folded when he came in. The bread he'd left the night before was gone, and the cup had been rinsed and placed upside down on the counter. Silent thanks in a world where trust didn't come easy. That night, he left a chair near the hearth and an extra spoon beside the stew pot. She sat, eventually, eating in small bites like her body had forgotten how to want food. They didn't speak. She didn't look at him. But when he stood to pour more stew, she didn't flinch. It was the closest thing to progress he could name. By the 4th day, he caught her gathering kindling outside the cabin. She didn't know how to split wood, not properly, but she tried, smashing bark and splinters with clumsy swings. He said nothing, just handed her a smaller axe. She stared at it for a long moment, then nodded once before continuing. Her hands blistered before noon. She didn't complain. He called her dusty in his head. It fit. Not because she was dirty, though she was, but because she seemed carved from the same grit as the land. Weathered. Ground down by sun and silence. He couldn't picture her with a name like Sarah or Jane. Those belonged to girls who braided ribbons and wore gloves to church. This one dug for roots and didn't cry. She spoke her first word on the 6th day. It was cold, the kind of sharp cold that bites through bone before the sun even finishes rising. Sam was in the barn, spreading hay. He turned to find her standing in the doorway, holding out a half-mended glove he'd dropped. She extended it without stepping inside. Her voice was soft and hoarse. "Yours." He took it gently. "Thanks." That night, she sat closer to the fire than usual. When she fell asleep in the chair, he draped a wool coat over her shoulders and didn't move it till dawn. A week passed, then another. Routine settled into something like rhythm. She fetched water, cleaned tools, mended what she could. He kept to the animals, the land, and whatever peace the silence between them offered. It wasn't companionship, not exactly. It was a truce between damaged people. And it held, until the day men came riding in from the valley. They showed up just before noon, dust rising behind them like a bad omen. Sam recognized one of them, Clay Dillard, mean to the marrow and always looking to claim what wasn't his. The other man was younger, unfamiliar, but his boots were spurred and his rifle worn slick. Trouble in every line of him. Sam met them halfway to the corral. Clay tipped his hat with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Sam," he drawled, "heard tell you got company up here. Thought we'd swing by, see if she's properly spoken for." Sam didn't smile. Ain't your business. The young one laughed. Ain't it? We got a neighbor down the ridge claims he saw a girl up here. Says she might be the one went missing near Dodge. She's not yours, Sam said flatly. Clay dismounted, slow and casual. Now, we don't mean no harm. But we got questions. That girl might be wanted. Might be stolen property. Sam's jaw tightened. Get off my land. The words hadn't even cooled in the air when he saw movement by the cabin. Dusty, standing in the doorway, gripping a long kitchen knife in both hands. Her face was pale, but her stance was steady. Clay turned, whistled low. Well now, ain't she a little spitfire? The young man stepped forward. Sam blocked him with a shoulder and drew his revolver. His voice dropped cold as sleet. One more step, and I bury you next to your daddy. The silence that followed was dense, alive with tension. The wind stirred through dry grass like a whisper of ghosts. Clay raised his hands and backed up. Easy now, no call for blood. You brought it with you. They mounted and rode off, muttering promises that didn't sound like they'd stay buried. After the dust settled, Sam turned to find Dusty still in the doorway, trembling. The knife clattered to the porch as she dropped to her knees. He didn't approach. Just knelt beside her, speaking low. You did right. She didn't answer. Just looked at him, eyes burning, not with fear but shame. That night, he found her kneeling by the fire, carefully placing a piece of dried meat beside his cup. A silent offering. He sat without a word. She didn't move. Just stared into the flames like they held some secret worth remembering. I know what it's like, he said finally. To be hunted. To not have anyone stand between you and wolves. She turned to him, slowly. Why did you? Because I've been the man who walked away, he said. Didn't like who I became. She didn't cry. He didn't reach for her. But when she rose, she left the knife behind. That was trust enough. In the morning, there was snow on the ground. Thin and patchy, like the sky couldn't quite commit to winter. Dusty stood outside in Sam's old coat, arms crossed, staring at the horizon. He watched her from the doorway. She turned, meeting his gaze. For the first time, she spoke without being prompted. Teach me, she said. He didn't ask what. He just nodded. The days that followed were carved from frost and silence. Sam rose early, always before the sun, and Dusty followed him into the fields. She didn't speak much, never had, but her hands learned quickly. He taught her to check the fence lines for breaks, how to watch the cattle for signs of lameness or fever. She learned how to boil leather straps to soften them, how to shoot straight with a rifle that kicked like a mule, and how to keep her breathing low enough not to spook a deer from 100 yards out. He didn't coddle her. She wouldn't have wanted that. What he gave her was harder to offer, space. Space to fail, to bruise, to bleed and curse without apology. She fell once, hard, trying to wrangle a calf stuck in a frozen gully. Her cheek split open on a rock, blood running warm down her jaw. Sam watched as she staggered up on her own, lip curled but eyes steady. She didn't look to him for help. That night, she stood in the doorway, dabbing the wound with a cloth soaked in whiskey. Sam leaned in the corner by the fire, polishing his rifle. You did good, he said. She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. That was something. One morning, near the end of January, they came across wolf tracks near the chicken coop. Sam crouched beside them, his fingers grazing the frozen prints. Dusty knelt beside him. Too close, she murmured. He glanced at her. You're starting to think like the land. She looked away, unsure whether it was a compliment or warning. By mid-afternoon, the sun had vanished behind a wall of clouds, and snow began falling again. They moved inside early. Sam made a fire while Dusty set 2 mismatched bowls on the table. She'd taken to cooking sometimes, nothing fancy, but she managed to make even beans taste like something more than survival. While the stew boiled, she sat cross-legged on the floor, sharpening the blade of her old knife with careful strokes. Sam studied her. She didn't look like the girl he'd found curled in dust weeks ago. The bones were still sharp beneath her skin, but now they were wrapped in muscle and grit. Her shoulders no longer sagged. She wore defiance like armor, but not the kind that picked fights. The kind that endured. "Who was chasing you?" he asked quietly. She stopped sharpening. The whetstone rested on her thigh, unmoving. After a long pause, she answered. "My step-uncle," she said. "After Ma died. He kept me locked in the root cellar half the summer. Said I owed him for the roof." Sam didn't interrupt. Just listened. "I ran when he got drunk enough to forget the bolt. Been runnin' ever since." She met his eyes. "Those men that came, I don't think they're done." "I know they're not," Sam said. She nodded, like she'd already come to that conclusion. The stew started to boil over. Neither of them moved to stop it. The next morning, Sam took her to the canyon trail 2 miles from the cabin. The path was steep, winding through red rock and twisted pines. At the top, he showed her the fire pit, an old signal post from the war, long forgotten. It was built for line-of-sight communication between scouts. He dug through a pile of rocks and uncovered a metal canister sealed with wax. "Gunpowder, matches, kindling. You ever see trouble comin', light it," he said. "Flame that high, someone'll see it from the hills." "Someone like who?" she asked. Sam hesitated. "There's a Comanche scout lives past the river bend. Calls himself Hollow Branch. We helped each other out during the raids a few years back. He'd come for a white girl. He'd come for a friend of mine." She said nothing more. But that night, she sat a little closer to the fire. Sam noticed her hand drift near his cup without thinking, pouring water into his mug before her own. The piece held until the full moon rose, hanging over the prairie like a coin dipped in silver. Sam was fixing a harness by lantern light when Rose began to scream, shrill and wild, from the barn. Dusty bolted upright, rifle already in hand. Sam grabbed his pistol and moved to the door. They didn't make it 2 steps before the glass shattered behind them. A bullet sliced through the table leg, ricocheting off the stove and hissing into the wall. Dusty dove for the floor. Sam flipped the lantern over, casting the room into shadow as another shot tore through the doorframe. Voices outside. 3, maybe 4. "They waited till dark," Sam muttered, crouched behind the hearth. "Cowards." Dusty crawled toward the back exit, rifle held tight. "You got the bluff path clear?" "I always do." "We run." "No," he said. "We stand." She nodded. He slipped her the revolver while he took the rifle. Dusty's hands didn't tremble. Another shot came, closer now. Footsteps creaked on the porch. Sam gave her one look. A quiet breath. Then he moved. The front door burst inward just as Sam fired, the muzzle flash throwing sparks like fireworks. A man screamed. Dusty slipped out the back and circled around the barn. 2 more figures were approaching from the west side. She took a knee, aimed, and squeezed the trigger. The first dropped. The second hesitated, and in that heartbeat of fear, Sam emerged from the shadows behind him and brought his rifle down like an axe. The man crumpled. Then silence. The last man ran, coward, or smart enough to know when death had drawn its line. When it was over, the cabin was scorched with smoke, the front wall peppered with holes. One of the windows hung shattered, moonlight spilling in over the blood-stained floorboards. Dusty leaned against the doorframe, breathing hard. Sam sat beside the fire, reloading with calm precision. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "We need to bury them." "We will." They sat in silence. Smoke drifted like ghosts. Later that night, Sam found her on the porch, holding a shovel, her hands scraped raw again, this time not from roots, but from laying men in the ground. He took it from her gently. "I'll finish," he said. She didn't argue. Just leaned against the post, staring into the dark. "They'll send more," she said. "I know. You could send me away." "I could." She looked at him then. Not pleading. Just prepared. But he didn't tell her to go. He went back to digging, and she stayed exactly where she was. Come morning, the sun rose red behind the hills. Dusty stood at the edge of the bluff, wind in her hair, rifle on her back. Not hiding. Not running. Waiting. The storm came down hard 2 nights later. Not the kind that howls and thrashes, but the quiet, thick kind, snow falling in heavy sheets, blanketing the earth in silence. Sam stood at the cabin window, cup in hand, watching the white swallow the last of the trail. Behind him, Dusty packed jerky into a satchel without a word. She didn't have to ask. She knew what the weather meant. No one would come tonight. No one would leave either. They'd reinforced the windows after the last attack. Sam had taught her how to hammer planks, how to brace the door with iron rods, how to spot a weakness in a man's defense before he ever reached for a weapon. But nothing he taught her was as important as the stillness he carried. That calm in the storm. She'd never known peace could be so quiet, so firm. Not until him. At dusk, she stepped outside and lit the fire pit by the bluff. Just once. A flare against the snowfall, brief and bright. It crackled high for a moment, then vanished into the wind. Neither of them said a word about it. They didn't need to. Sam knew she'd been watching the ridges for days, hoping for Hollow Branch. They ate by firelight, silence hanging between them like a third presence. Sam's shoulder still ached from the fight, but he'd hidden it well. Dusty wasn't fooled. After dinner, she placed a fresh poultice beside his cot without a word, her face unreadable. When he sat beside her on the floor, he held her gaze longer than he had before. "You planning on staying once spring comes?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "Don't know. Still thinking about running?" "No. Just not used to standing still." He nodded. "Takes getting used to." That night, dreams came hard and vivid, the kind that clung to the ribs like bruises. Sam dreamed of fire, of the war, of his brother's face crushed beneath the weight of cannon smoke, of betrayal and the men he couldn't save. Dusty dreamed of cellars and footsteps on stairs, of chains rattling and breath held for too long. When they woke, both were quiet, shadows still clinging behind their eyes. Mid-morning brought movement on the ridge. Dusty saw it first, crouched near the coop with a rifle slung low. A flicker, there, near the pines. She ducked behind the woodpile, signaling Sam with a hand gesture he'd taught her. He stepped out with a shovel in one hand, pistol tucked in his belt. Casual. Alert. From the tree line came a figure on horseback, wrapped in elk hide and feathers that danced like smoke in the cold. Hollow Branch. He dismounted slow, eyes sweeping the land with the precision of a hawk. His face was carved like old stone, no emotion, only purpose. Sam met him halfway. Dusty stayed put, watching every move. Hollow Branch spoke in a low voice. "Saw your fire. Thought you were dead." "Not yet." The scout glanced at the cabin. "She the one. She's got enemies. She got you." Sam didn't answer, but Hollow Branch seemed satisfied. He nodded once. "I'll stay the night." Dusty cooked that evening, her hands moving with practiced ease as Hollow Branch watched her in silence. When she placed a bowl before him, he grunted something close to approval. "You've seen war," he said at last. Her mouth twitched. "I've seen worse." He nodded. "Good." Later, as the men spoke in quiet tones near the fire, Dusty sat outside, carving a strip of wood with her blade. Her breath rose in faint clouds. She didn't trust easily, but something about Hollow Branch reminded her of Sam, worn, quiet, but with eyes that missed nothing. "Tomorrow," Sam said when she came in, "we ride to the southern ridge. Hollow Branch knows a cave, deep, narrow. Could work if they come in numbers." She didn't ask who they meant. She already knew. The cave was 5 miles out, nestled between black rocks and hidden behind brush. It stank of wolves and mold, but it was defendable. Sam paced the perimeter while Dusty set traps, snares, broken glass, caltrops laid beneath the snow. Hollow Branch circled above on the ridge, bow in hand, moving like mist. That night, they slept in shifts. Dusty barely closed her eyes. Her heart thudded like a drum as the wind rattled outside. She could feel it. Something was coming. By dawn, it came. 5 men on horseback, rifles drawn, faces masked against the cold. Clay wasn't among them, but the younger one from before rode at the front, and his eyes burned with vengeance. They circled the cabin, then fanned out, searching. When they found it empty, they followed the hoofprints toward the bluff. Dusty had left those prints on purpose, misleading, scattered. The first man hit one of the snares and screamed. Another went down under Hollow Branch's arrow. Sam waited until the third came close, then rose from behind a rock and fired once, clean through the chest. Dusty picked her target and squeezed the trigger. Her shot hit true, and the man dropped like a stone. Only one ran, blood trailing him like a ribbon. Sam let him go. Back at the cabin, they sat in silence, the heat of victory already cooling into exhaustion. Hollow Branch stood in the doorway, face unreadable. "They won't stop," he said. Sam looked at Dusty. "What do you want to do?" She met his eyes, steady as firelight. "I'm tired of running." Hollow Branch gave her a slow nod. "Then you fight. Not with rage, but with roots." She frowned. "What's that mean?" "It means if you want to stop being hunted, you need to belong somewhere. Put roots in the ground. Let them grow." She didn't answer, but she understood. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt the fences. Sam taught her how to brand calves, how to rotate crops before the soil gave up. Hollow Branch came and went, bringing news, trading skins, sharing stories in a voice that carried old scars. Dusty planted a row of beans by the eastern wall, her first crop. Sam didn't say much, just left her an old seed pouch and a small shovel he'd carved smooth. When spring came, the frost broke. The creek ran thick and cold again. And Dusty, once a shadow in the dust, now walked the fields in the morning light, rifle across her back, chin held high. She never asked Sam for anything. But one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun drop behind the hills, she said, "If I stay, I want to build something." He nodded. "Then we build." Not long after, she carved her name into a fence post. Just one word, May. It wasn't the name she'd been given, but it was the one she chose. A name rooted in soil, not shame. The last shot of the story fades with Sam and May walking the pasture at dusk. The land behind them scarred but growing. Ahead, only horizon. And so, dear viewer, what would you have done if you saw a girl digging for roots in the dust? Would you have walked away, or left her with food, and more? If this story gripped your heart, like it did ours, leave a comment below. Subscribe. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances and the grit it takes to stay. Because sometimes, all it takes is one meal to begin a life worth living.